All right, cool. Let's get started. So first, a few announcements. First of all, reminder to your coffee chats. I know we keep growing this into you. I know you are busy, but they're pretty fun, honestly. And we only make you do 5, unlike other clubs that make you do like 20. But to get those done. So far, Christian's contacted me. But other than that, there's also a lot of other cool people in the club. TPH, don't contact me because you're stuck with me every Friday anyways. All right, cool. So today we will be talking about the DCF. So before we actually begin, just a quick caveat. In my 4 years at Cornell, or 3.5 now, I personally think the DCF is unexplainable in an hour. So I expect all of you to walk out of here today, well, next 2 weeks, because we're going to finish this up next week, like confused and not knowing anything more than you knew today.
All we made our DCF do today, and Spencer and I had no idea how to do it.
Right. So as you know, we lost the week because of the school.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a thing. Honestly, but yeah, so usually, I didn't know how to do a DCF until midway through sophomore year. So for all of y'all that are freshmen or first semester sophomores, the main thing is you'll hear this once, you'll forget it all, and then you just have to work through it yourself before you finally kind of get it. And to be honest, no one at Cornell is even any semblance of competency at modeling, because most of the training gets done when you go full-time. But you should kind of know how to get a job interview and to participate. But yeah, don't worry if you don't know anything after, because it's unexplainable and unteachable, but we have to do it because it's part of finance. All right, cool. So yes, today is DCF day. And basically a quick overview of a DCF. So a DCF, unlike comps, is a method that looks at the intrinsic value of a company. So it's basically saying, taking what you think all the future cash flows of the company will be, and then you're asking yourself, what is all the cash flow to eternity? What the value of that is today. So you can see here some some math that you will see in every finance class you will ever take. But basically, this is just the equation for the present value. It's basically the sum of all the cash generated by the business in each time period, which is T, and then discounted by a discount rate of R, which is, as you can see on the denominator. So, and basically to break this down, the summation sign just looks like that. You go from cash flow in the first period plus cash flow in the second period, all the way to cash flow in the end period divided by your discount rate, and you discount it back to present. So in a DCF, because we're looking at it into perpetuity, n is equal to infinity, or I guess 6 billion, because the Earth will explode in 6 billion years, or get swallowed by the sun. But still, basically infinity in terms of our lifetime. Cool. So some food for thought on. Actually, the logic behind a discount rate is that $1 worth today is worth $1 more tomorrow, because you could do stuff with $1 today. And there's several other factors you have to account for in terms of why $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. Cool. So some food for thought. If we increase cash flow, what happens to the valuation? So if we generate more cash, yes, correct. If we have more cash, we get the value of our business is worth more. So as you can see, mathematically, cash flow is on the top, which means that an increase in numerator leads to an increase in the value of the company. On the flip side, if we increase the discount rate, this is a typo, what happens to the valuation? So based on the flip side, because R is on the bottom, if you increase R, the denominator increases, which means the value of the company goes down. But also the intuition is that if we discount our future cash flows more, so if we so if like $1 more in the future is worth comparably less than $1 today, then obviously your future cash flows will be worth less, and thus your present value will go down. Cool. Any questions on that? Great. So next, these are the 4 steps to a DCF. So first, you project out free cash flow. And then you determine your terminal value. You calculate your weighted average cost of capital, and then you discount back to present. So this is just a skeleton. We will be going over what each of these things mean. And just a quick note here, WACC, or weighted average cost of capital, is the proxy for the discount rate we use in DCF. Great, so first is projected free cash flow. So this, I realize the colors are kind of jarring to the eye, but oh well. You have your, basically, this is just a formula you're kind of going to have to memorize. But it's your operating income, so your revenue minus COGS minus operating expenses, that gets your operating income. You subtract out your taxes, and then you get your basically tax adjusted operating income, or earnings before interest and after taxes, which is what the acronym stands for. Then you adjust for your non-cash items, so you add back depreciation and amortization, because D&A is part of getting to operating income, but it's not you getting rid of cash, because it's a non-cash expense. Then you have subtracting out capital expenditures, so the money you spend back into the business and then you use towards funding future operations, for example, equipment. And then you subtract out an increase in net working capital. And we went over this on the cash flow statement in terms of operating assets and operating liabilities. An increase in assets is a use of cash versus an increase in liabilities is a source of cash. So this is why we are subtracting out an increase in net working capital. And then we get to unlevered free cash flow. So you can see the note on the bottom that unlevered free cash flow is the cash flow available to both equity and debt holders. So you can see here, one notable thing missing from this equation is things like interest expense, which is a use of cash, but if that is not part of unlevered free cash flow. So typically when you're doing a DCF, you want to use unlevered free cash flow to get the whole value of the firm, versus the second one is levered free cash flow. So here you would add things like interest expense to that equation, because that accounts for, so when you consider leverage of a company, you're considering the debt that affects the company's cash flow. So considering that, you have to subtract out your cash that you owe to your debt holders, then you get cash only available to your equity holders. So levered free cash flow is way more complicated. So most people just use unlevered free cash flow, which you derive from using this formula. Yes.
These numbers, do you want to calculate most of them, or can you just use them for
We will be going over how to project them. Yeah, I do. You should calculate them yourself.
Because when I did the comps for our stock,
right?
And I did this each one we did for Kellogg's and General Mills.
Sure.
And then when I did that, it took so much longer.
Right. So in comps, it's a lot easier just to pull CapIQ numbers, because CapIQ is based on the current market conditions. But for DCF, you have to put in assumptions yourself to account for growth rates and stuff.
Would these come from the 10K?
So the historical numbers will come from the 10K, but your projections, you have to use your brain. And basically you come up with your growth rates as a result of your catalysts. Because your investment thesis is you saying how the company will perform in the future. So you have to back those up with numbers, and that's what the DCF is for. But yeah, the other way, if you're stuck or something, you could just pull some equity research reports and then compare your numbers to their numbers just before a sanity test. Because again, we're undergrad students, and we're not industry professionals, but ideally you want to be practicing this so you can get better at it. And if you want to do something like this in the future, you know what you're doing. Cool. Any other questions? Great. Yeah, so other free cash flow notes. So time horizon is usually 5 years. So you want to be projecting this out for 5 years because, and potentially 10 for very stable companies in very stable industries. However, after that, it becomes extremely difficult to make realistic assumptions because like I'm sure like 10 years ago, you didn't know what you'll be doing now. So obviously, if you looking ahead 10 years, it's going to be very difficult because no one knows what's going to happen in 10 years with any semblance of certainty. And so this is usually done in conjunction with the operating model. So you normally project out your 3 financial statements and then plug them into your DCF and derive your DCF on that. But like for the purpose of DCF, you just really need like your cash flows from the business and then just projecting them out. And if you're doing like a real deal where like real dollars and companies are at stake, definitely way more diligence is required. But for this like exercise and Ed series, we'll be just going over projecting out the line items you need for the DCF. And finally, the stuff you get from our 10K, extra research reports, and other financial sources, and that can be very helpful in guiding your analysis. And obviously, your growth rates, your like expenditures will be derived on what you're saying this company will do in the future. So if you're pitching like give me an example of what you are pitching. I don't know what you are pitching. Christian, what is your group pitching? What is that?
So what we do is genetic testing.
Okay.
So like,
oh, you're in healthcare. Never mind.
Yeah.
Annabelle, what is your group pitching? What? Oh, it's the water company, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So let's say you're pitching Xylem, and it's a water company. You read in the news that because I believe they have operations in China. So let's say like Chinese government suddenly decides they want to be environmentally conscious. It makes companies spend way more on like water infrastructure. So from there, you would obviously expect the Xylem's capital expenditures to increase because of some like surrounding external environment doing market research. So then you would model out your capital expenditures to go up in the future within the short term. So a lot of it is based on what actually goes on in the real world, and then plugging those catalysts which y'all are coming up with, or your risks, or your other like external news events relating to the business onto your model in order to come up with a valuation. Great. So then the second step is to calculate your terminal value. So because I'm telling you to do not project past 5 years, but then how do we account for cash flows into perpetuity? So essentially we do this by just having a number for the value of the firm after your 5 years of projections. So essentially there's 2 methods to this. So first is a perpetuity growth rate, also called a Gordon growth model. And then second is the exit multiple method. So first, what is the perpetuity growth rate method? So basically, instead of using shoddy projections, as discussed earlier, we're just going to assume a constant free cash flow growth rate to infinity. So essentially, this is like, again, more math equations, but you have your terminal value. And this terminal value in terms of the dollar value of the last projection year. So basically what a dollar is worth in your last year of projections. So basically it's free cash flow of your last projection year. You multiply that by 1 plus your growth rate. So basically your last projection year's free cash flow times the growth rate of your into infinity. And then you divide by your discount rate subtracted out by your growth rate. So that probably did not make any sense to you because this is a simplified formula from a much longer equation. So basically you can see here, this is the bottom part. This is a similar structure to the present value formula before. So this is just saying, you can see the first term is free cash flow 1 year after your projection period divided by 1 plus discount rate. This plus the free cash flow times your so you grow your free cash flow twice, and divided by 1 plus r to the, oh, I wrote 1 there. Damn it, now it's way more confusing. But the second one should be a 2. So this number should be a 2. And then you add it all the way into infinity. So that, again, you can see this is a very similar equation to your discounted cash flow, well, the first slide. And then you basically get your terminal value, which you discount back to present. So again, this is partly why none of you all will walk away not knowing anything, because it really does take practice to fully get it down. But this is basically the intuition and the method behind doing this. So yeah, any questions regarding this? This will be hammered in more for those A majors if you take finance. Basically, all finance is having to deal with this. And then for the non-A majors, the business minor will makes you take finance, and otherwise, like just self-studying some guides or something would help you with this. And the second way is much more easier, because this is just taking what you learned last week in comps, and then you're basically assuming that after your projection period, your firm will be acquired. And basically, you take the last 12 months EV over EBITDA multiple. So it's basically how much you're willing to pay for each dollar of EBITDA of the firm. And then you multiply it by the EBITDA in the last forecast year. And there you get your enterprise value of the firm after your 5 years of projections. And therefore, you get your terminal value from that. And so you might ask which one is better and which do we use. So we ideally want to use both to get a full range of estimates, because the more numbers and methods you use, the more accurate picture you can get of the value of your firm. But in general, the Gordon growth method is more respected by academics, because again, the DCF is intrinsic analysis. So you're looking at the company itself and not comparing to others. So this is just looking at like keeping it within the scope of the model, like you're looking at the company itself. But in general, IGZA multiple might be preferred more in the industry because it's grounded in market realities, and therefore it opens your analysis up to less assumptions. But again, the market could be wrong, so therefore it might be biased to sway the multiple up or down, so you don't know if the market conditions reflect the true value of the business, which is why you use both along with comps to get a more accurate gauge. Great, so number 3, your weighted average cost of capital. So this is, so basically the R you see in the above equations, this is basically how you get to that R. And this is essentially, it's just saying the average rate of return a company expects to compensate all its different investors. So for example, you can see that like, we'll be going this later, but like, if someone invests in this company, they obviously expect to make some money off of their, like, for example, they purchase a share of this company, or if they purchase like a piece, like if they lend you money and they expect interest back, the weighted average cost of capital is just saying how much they expect to make from your business. So you can see like you obviously need to compensate where you get money from in order to have like actually borrow that money. For example, like the reason why someone would prefer to purchase your stock is they think they could make as much return from your stock as like the market, the S&P 500, or like another company. It's similar with debt. It costs you interest to borrow money and take on debt. So therefore, there is a cost associated to that capital. And a more stable company would get debt for cheaper. So that will lower their cost of debt. And a more riskier company that is probably in higher growth will require much more interest rate in order to get that debt than opposed to a more stable example. Great. So basically, you can see here, again, a lot of variables, but essentially you have E is basically equity and D is debt. So you can see that you weight the cost of equity and the cost of debt by the percentage of equity to the capital structure and the debt to the entire capital structure, respectively. Because a business is funded by both equity and debt, and then you add them up together, and that is basically your capital structure. and therefore the cost of each will be weighted by the proportion of it in your capital structure. And then the cost of equity we'll discuss later in the capital asset pricing model. And then you have here you can see the 1 minus T times the cost of debt. So the 1 minus T is 1 minus tax rate, because you paying down interest expense on your debt is tax deductible because it's interest expense. So therefore your debt is made cheaper because you're able to save on taxes from it. So therefore, for example, if your interest rate on your debt is 5%, aka you're paying 5% on each dollar of the loan, but you save if the tax rate's 30% or 40%, your tax rate's 40%, then therefore 60% of 5% is 3%, so your true cost of debt would be 3%. So then you get the tax adjusted cost of debt from this 1 minus T. And for your cost of debt, you typically just go on Bloomberg and find the current yield of the yield to maturity on outstanding debt. So it's basically seeing how much this debt will return until you hold it to maturity, and therefore that's your cost of debt. And again, this is a lot of jargon. Yeah, that's your question.
Is preferred stock also calculated into WACC?
Yes, it is. So normally, so preferred stock is also calculating a weighted average cost of capital, because again, preferred stock is a form of financing that the firm uses, and it's not exactly equity and it's also not exactly debt, but typically a more robust method would add a P element to it, so E plus D plus P, so it's equity, debt, and preferred stock. And then your cost of preferred stock is the dividend owed to your preferred stockholders divided by the market value of your preferred stockholders. But that's less common because not every firm has preferred stock, and usually it's much more important to understand the equity and debt side, which is why I didn't include preferred stock. But usually for a full blown DCF analysis, you would include preferred stock if it does exist. Great. Cool. And then you have your cost of equity. So we approximate cost of equity with the capital asset pricing model. So you can see here that it's the risk-free rate plus the beta times your market risk premium. So the risk-free rate is basically how much you can earn from your money that's risk-free. So for example, we measured that by the 10-year treasury because the 10-year treasury is the most closest approximation towards the time frame of your 5-year DCF. So because the argument is that the United States government is risk-free, because if you lend the U.S. government money, they will pay you back no matter what, because the U.S. has never defaulted on its debt, and they could just freely print money to cover their debts, even though there's huge economic implications to that. But you are basically guaranteed to get your money back if you invest into the government, if you invest in government bonds. So then you add the beta times the market risk premium. So the market risk premium is pretty self-explanatory. Why not? So in order for someone to invest in your company, you obviously have to beat the market rate, because the market rate is an aggregate of every single thing in a market. So it's obviously way less risky to invest in the market than your one specific company. So the market risk premium is basically the risk in the market minus the risk-free rate. So how much the market makes over the risk-free rate, which is typically 4 to 8%, depending on what you look at. And that's the market risk premium. And then finally, you have to weight the market risk premium by your beta. So basically, the beta is saying how does your stock price move in response to the market moving. So a beta higher than 1 symbolizes your company is more risky. So for example, a 1.2 beta means if the market goes up by $1, then your stock will go up by $1.20. Or so if the stock market increases by 1% in value, your stock will go up by 1.2% in value. Versus if the market decreases by 1% in value, your stock will decrease by 1.2% in value. So similarly, a stock that has a beta of less than 1, for example, more stable companies like consumer stocks, if your beta is 0.8%, if your beta is 0.8, then a 1% increase in the market means that 0.8% in your stock versus a 1% decrease in the market is a 0.8% decrease in your stock. And then you have things like with negative beta, which is like, for example, things like gold, because typically if the stock market crashes, gold is like a scarce resource that people believe in, versus like having doubts about the market. So, for example, if you have a negative beta, then an increase in the stock market will actually decrease your stock price, versus a decrease in the market will actually increase your stock price, or at least it's typically that you observe in the market leading up to the current day. Right. And then so basically the argument this is making is you have to at least meet the risk-free rate, because otherwise investor would just invest in a 10-year treasury and get their money risk-free. And then you also have to like beat the market, or at least be as good as the market, weighted by how risky your stock is in regards to the market. And therefore, that's your cost of equity. And this is probably the most complicated part of the DCF. The other stuff are comparatively way less complicated. So we will not be showing this today, but we'll be talking about it more next week. So like if you have questions about this, we'll be actually plugging in the numbers to like get a weighted average cost of capital next week. So regardless of how confused you are, just hold your questions until we talk about it 1 week from now. And then finally, discount back to present. So this is pretty basic. You just apply your discount rate, your weighted average cost of capital. You take all your cash flows, find the appropriate discounts based on the number of years that have gone by, and then you get your present value of your discount, of your future cash flows. So there's one other thing to talk about, and it's basically you have a DCF in your numbers. You assume that all the money, so it's like the sum of all of this year's money at the end of the year. So if you, for example, like if you use 1 plus WACC to the power of 3 for year 3, you're basically assuming all of your cash flow comes at the end. Obviously, a business gets most of their cash flows not at the end. So basically what we do is called a mid-year convention, which is basically we discount everything based on the middle of the year. So therefore you have like you basically average out the discount between cash you generate in the beginning of the year and cash you generate at the end of the year. So you can see here, for example, that the present value of the cash flows in year 3 is 1 plus weighted average cost of capital to the power of 2.5. So this is just symbolizing from like a bit past year 2 to the end of year 3. If you discount everything by 2.5, it gets you approximate value for the discounting of all the cash flows in year 3. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So then you have the advantages and disadvantages to DCF. So the pros, it's widely used in practice and respected academically. It's also a theoretically very sound method of valuation because you're pegging stuff to the intrinsic value of the cash flow generation of the business. And it also allows you to value individual pieces of business as well as potential synergies if you have when you acquire a company. Also, it's not influenced by current market pricing, which could be an advantage if you think the market pricing is wrong. So then a few of the cons, there's no real consensus on implementation. There's a lot of different opinions on how to project different things. It also requires very detailed company financials. So it's very helpful if you have a public company, but for a private company, you're kind of out of luck. It's also very sensitive to your assumptions because if you're pitching a stock, you obviously want to paint your company in as best of a light as possible. So therefore, garbage in is equal to garbage out. So if you have trash assumptions, you're going to get a not accurate and non-descriptive valuation. Great. So that is it for the going over how the mechanics of a DCF. So as you can see, none of you probably understand things completely, but hopefully once we do one together, it will start to make a bit more sense. But real quick, so everyone open up the Excel, but real quick, we'll just go over the DCF illustration. So here you have the cash flow, right? So you have 10,000 in year 1, 12,000 in year 2, etc., up to 14,000 in year 5, and then you have the terminal value in year $5 into infinity as 100,000. So for this let's assume that the discount rate is, so R is equal to, where'd it go? Yeah, so for this, assume R is equal to 0.08. All right, yeah, so R is 0.08. If it shows up as 0, go to home, and then like this number with the arrow pointing to the left, it shows more decimals. Yeah, because I think I set the number to show no decimals. But you have 0.08. So essentially, the value of this is, first you want to calculate the amount you discount by you discount everything by. So basically, so this is equal to 1 plus 0.08 to the power of the year. So you want to lock in the K3. So put dollar signs next to the K3 because you're going to use the same discount rate for everything up to infinity. So, and then you have, if you drag this across to row G, you can see that this is this amount you discount everything by because you're increasing everything by 8% every year. So these values, if you go up to what we have earlier, is just these numbers on the bottom. So 1 plus r to the power of 1 is 1.08, 1 plus r to the power of 2 is 1.17, etc. Great, and then you have 10,000 divided by 1.08 because that's your cash flows, and then you want to drag this all the way across. As you can see, the numbers are decreasing or staying approximately the same, even though like your cash flow tends to be going higher because again, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. And then for, yes?
You go back to your 1.08 and I missed that.
Yeah. It was 1 plus K3, so 1 plus R to the power of how many years you go up to in the future. Oh, and the...
How can you get the dollar signs like, automatically?
F4. If you have your cursor on K3, if you F4 gets you to there. Right. Cool. And then you have your terminal year in year $5. So because this is in year $5, you just take this and you divide it by this. Because this is getting from year $5 back down to year $0. So this is your terminal value at year 5. So therefore, it's around 68,000 for your entire time. For is it 68,000 at time 0? Okay, and then you sum everything up. And essentially you have, what is this? $118,000 in, that's your valuation of this pretend company or your future cash flows. Right, so that is just an extremely stripped down and basic version of DCF. You take your 5 years of cash flow projections plus your terminal value, and you discount it back to present. Yes?
Yeah, we can't just do this for our company.
Correct, right.
Have to do the whole.
Right, yeah. So that's just, this is concept reinforcement, not what you do in practice.
Guys, it's just not accurate. I mean, less accurate, like what's the
Oh, cool, this is just made up numbers, right?
obviously.
But like, well, the thing is, the cash flow statement is not unlevered.
Yeah.
The cash flow statement, well, because you could derive everything from the cash flow statement, but the cash flow, net change in cash from the cash flow statement itself is not unlevered free cash flow. It has things that we do not account for in a DCF. All right. Does anyone there questions?
We only have to do a DCF for our company right now.
Oh no, just only for your company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All good over there on the right, my right side of the room. All right. Okay. So now we are going to do a DCF. Or start a DCF. So we're not going to finish everything today, but we will project out the free cash flows today, and we'll talk about the other stuff in the future. Or next week, yeah. Great. So basically, this is, so again, this is your basic like DCF model. It's the line items above, so basically your operating income minus taxes. That gets you to your earnings before interest and after taxes. Then add back D&A minus CapEx and subtract out increases in net working capital. And that gets you to your unlevered free cash flow. So basically, we have from the 10Ks. So basically for this, for simplicity of analysis, we have up to the year of 2018. Unfortunately, 3/4 of 2019 have happened already, but because this is Ed Series, we're just going to talk about the years. But normally, you would also include the 3 years of 2019 as your historicals. Then you would have to project for the last year of 2019, and then you project out the other years in your DCF. But for this, we're just going to assume this is December 31st, 2018, and then we're projecting out from 2019 all the way to 2023. Right. So essentially, I feel for this year, this semester, if your sector directors are making you do the DCF, I think this is fine. You don't need to go into more in-depth models. But essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to project out the revenues, and then most other things are going to be a percentage of revenue because the driver for everything is your revenue, and then everything else is to support the cash generation from the revenue. So basically, you're going to start from revenue, and then everything else will be a percentage of revenue. The one caveat to that is that oftentimes D&A is a percentage of CapEx because your D&A is derived from how much CapEx you have to replenish your assets. But for this, like making everything as percentage revenue is fine for a underclassmen level of a DCF, and even for an undergrad level of a DCF. Once you get to like your internship, you won't be doing this, and B, like people with years of industry experience will have more insights. Cool. So you can see here, this is the numbers, and then here below are your are your assumptions. So basically, in general, you take your historical numbers and then you kind of model out the projected numbers in relation to your historical numbers, plus what you expect things to change. So basically, like the past can tell us more about the future, but then again, like the past is still the past. So things in the future might be different, but like we can use the past to gauge what happens in the future and then modify that based on your research on your catalysts and your investment thesis. Yes.
I guess for historical, is it like purely yearly based, or like would you do like our sector directors will just do like the most recent information, but how would you use it? Like not like Moody's fiscal year ends in December.
Right.
Would we use 2018 as our like last historical?
Well, so you would figure everything out up to Q3 of 2019 because those are historical. You will project out the last quarter of 2019 and then project out the rest of the DCF. But because everything there is historical, you would have to because everything there is historical, you like it happened. So you shouldn't be projecting that because it happened. So you'll project out Q4 of 2019 and then project out from like 2020 through 2024. Yep. I mean, they should be helping you with it. I can also help you with it. But yeah. But like real quick to dive in. So basically, we're going to first step is calculate what revenue is historically. So, and this is just a revenue growth rate. So you have this divided by this minus 1. Right. Okay. So, and that gets you to negative 4.1%. So, and real quick gut check, you can see that 12,965 divided by 13,525 minus 1. That's around negative 4.1%. That seems right based on what happened. So this is just basically the same. So normally you would consider like things as like 2016 minus 2015 divided by 2015. This divided by this minus 1 is just like a simplified version. It's equivalent mathematically, but it's easier to type it on the keyboard. So then we could use our handy dandy Control C, Control V, or just Control R, and then you basically get over there. So you can see that this is from 2017 to 2016, that growth rate, and then this is from 2017 through 2018, and that growth rate. Right. So then to model out the future growth rates, we essentially have, so normally like we would just average everything out, but because the reason the 4.1% happened is some special thing happened in 2016, and that will not happen again. So basically we're just going to average out 2017 and 2018. And you want to lock those in because we're just going to assume a constant growth rate for these 5 years. You have a Mac. F4 does not work on a Mac. Just write dollar signs.
You have to do it with the dollar before the number.
Yeah. Well, so the dollar before the letter basically locks the column, and a dollar before the number locks in rows. So for this, you technically only need the dollar before the letter, but like, yeah, but it's fine. So then you have 2.3 out to 2023.
For our DCF, we're going to have to find all the historical information.
Yeah, but this is just copy and pasting from the 10K.
Oh, 10K.
Yeah, or 10K, 10Q. So yeah. And then you have, so then you have this times 1 plus this. So you're saying that this will grow at 2.3% every year. So then your cell G5, so 2018 times your growth rate, or times 1 plus your growth rate, is ready for 2019. And then, therefore, you get all the way up to that number. So you can see here that this number is G5, which is your revenue in 2018, times 1 plus growth rate for 2019. And then this is your 2019 number times your growth rate for 2020. And then you have your 2020 revenue. And then you keep on going. So as I can see, this is a, as you can see, this is a continuous process through the model. Great. So now that we have our revenue, we basically want to calculate our cost of goods sold based on our revenue. So here, this is cost of goods sold. This divided by that. So it's D6 divided by D5. So this is your cost of goods sold as the percentage of your revenue. So then you drag that across, as you can see, like pretty stable. So this is COGS in 2015 divided by COGS in by revenue 2015. If you go to here, it's 2016, 2017, and 2018. And this is just done by copy and pasting the formula because the formula shifts with these cells. Yeah, basically. Like that's the, I mean, it's the lazy way to do it, but it's also like,
is that right?
Well, it's right.
Yes.
Well, I mean, this is the lazy way to do projections, but who cares? Oh, because for the expenses, so for the expenses, it makes sense. You would do this normally as well. But for things like DNA and CapEx, there's a lot of management projections in 10K that you could look as guiding numbers. There's a lot of like variations in terms of your catalysts. So if you're saying they're gonna expand the number of stores in the future, then obviously their CapEx will increase than their historicals. But for this relatively stable company, no one's pitching it. We have no reason to believe they'll do anything different than the status quo. So therefore, we can just do this for all the lines. And then you average the four historical numbers for COGS for an average of negative 64.2%. Right, and then do the same thing, copy them towards the rest of the columns, and then you have a constant negative 64.2% cost of goods sold relative to revenue. Right. Yeah, let me know when everyone's there. Okay, cool. And then you have your revenue from that year times your percentage of cost of goods sold relative to your revenue. And then you have negative 8890 for your cost of goods sold. Yeah, because the number in H18 at the bottom is basically how much cost of goods sold as a percentage of revenue. So therefore, to get the number of cost of goods sold, you take your revenue for that year times the cost of goods sold as a percentage of revenue to get your projected cost of goods sold for 2019. Right, and then you copy and paste that down up to 2023. So this is just saying, so whatever this cost of goods sold number is here, that is just the number in this cell. Because if you keep on going, revenue times cost of goods sold for 2020. Then you have revenue for times cost of goods sold in 2021, etc. So as you can see here, let's say like you change this number to like negative 30%. You can see that this number changes as well. So this is kind of, so all your things in your DCF should be done on your assumption section, and that would change your actual numbers. So obviously we don't expect it to decrease to 30%, but that's just an illustration of like how like modeling works. Did he use dollar signs? Yep. Yep. Well, so the benefit to like this, so you could actually just take out the dollar signs on next to the numbers, and you will see why in the future when we do SG&A.
You just do equals average, parentheses, dollar D.
Sure. Yep. Cool. So SG&A, just repeat what you did for COGS, because again, it's expense. So you repeat what you do for COGS. So SG&A divided by revenue. Then you copy that across. So that's just the formula there. So this, again, this has no dollar signs. Well, this one has no dollar signs on the historical section. Did everyone get there yet? Great. So now you can just do the average thing again for those nons. And then you get the average of the SG&A for each year. All right, let me know when all of you have reached this point. Right, so then same thing as in your cost of goods sold, you multiply that, your revenue by your assumption at the bottom, and then you drag it across, and therefore you get your SG&A for your projected years. All right, has everyone reached this point? All right, cool. So then you have taxes. So for taxes, we're going to do something different, as you all know, because we passed a tax bill a while ago. The corporate tax rate decreased, which is why you see this negative 13.16% being a lot closer to zero than what you have historically. And again, because of policy changes, you can see a massive decrease in your effective tax rate. And note how none of these are the actual tax rate, because typically companies have operations elsewhere in different countries with different tax laws, or they have other operating conditions that lower their tax hit. So therefore, these are basically effective tax rates that I took directly off from what they disclose on the 10K. So for this, we're just going to copy 2018 over and have negative 13.6% in the years in the future. Because 2018 is different than our historical years because something may have happened with tax legislation. The historical years aren't really reflective of what we can expect in the future. All right, so now we basically want to calculate your gross profit. So this form was done for you, so you can just copy and paste that across. And this is just the sum. This is just revenue minus COGS. And similarly with operating income, it's just COGS minus SG&A. So that's your gross profit all the way down to your operating income.
What did you do for gross profit?
This is so you copy. So you have a window. So you take this, and then you drag it out and Control R. And what that does is just clicking Control V on G7, going here and putting Control V and just copy and pasting the formula from G7 all onto from H to L, and you basically do the same thing for your operating income. Correct. Yep. And this is you're taking the gross profit and subtracting out the SG&A. Correct. Right. So then you have your operating income, and you take your taxes. So this is this multiplied by your tax rate. Cool. Yep. And then copy and paste that over. Right, and for this earnings before interest and after taxes, you just take your operating income, subtract out your taxes. So, I mean, you could copy and paste the formula over, but this is just adding these two together. So 1485 minus 202, or plus negative 202, which is minus 202. And then you could just copy and paste that over into your projection year. All right, let me know when you all have reached this point. All right, so then we do the same thing for DNA and CapEx. Again, with these two, normally you would just delve further into their 10Ks. They have much more disclosure on those in your notes section. But for this and for your model that you're going to do, or some of you were asked to do for this semester, this is fine. So then you just basically do what you did in COGS and SG&A here. And the logic behind this is to generate revenue. You're going to depreciate your assets, and you're also going to need to spend money on capital expenditures to replenish your assets to continue generating revenue. So therefore, that's the logic and argument for why this makes sense. So again, this is your CapEx or your DNA as a percentage of revenue, and then you want to extend that out. So as you can see, again, pretty stable. Again, a very mature company. And then you do the average thing again. And it should be 3.9% going on into the future. All right. Is everyone there? Cool. So then you go, same thing, revenue times your 3.9%, and copy and paste that. And then you have your depreciation up to 2023. And then you do the same for CapEx. So it's your CapEx divided by revenue. Yeah, so depreciation is you add back it. So DNA, you add it back because of non-cash expense.
So you still do multiply by revenue?
Yeah. So because CapEx is negative, you multiply by revenue, or you divide by revenue.
Right, I did that part, but then when you go to CapEx, like, etc.
Right. Yeah, you average that again. Yeah, so then when you go there, you would multiply by revenue because a positive number times a negative number is a negative number. So because we're subtracting out CapEx, and then we sum it all together at the end. Right, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, cool. And then again, you multiply revenue by your assumption. And you have a gradually increasing capex number. Cool. And finally, you're increasing net working capital. So this is NA here because I didn't have a. So because increase is based on the previous year, because I only looked at documents that gave me full years, so I looked at 210Ks. I didn't have the 2014 numbers for your operating assets and liabilities. So because I was lazy, I just didn't do it. But so we're just gonna do it for 3 years. So again, this is your increase in net working capital divided by your revenue. So this is a way less than the other numbers because they tend to fluctuate a bit less for each company. So and one final note on this one. So for this, your increase in net working capital, the numbers there can potentially be negative, just because 1 year you might spend more, might get more operating assets and liabilities. The other year you might end up with a decreased amount of working capital. The next year you might again have an increased amount of working capital. So then these numbers would fluctuate based on that. Normally this is not this is probably the least exact science on this model. Normally you would actually calculate your balance sheet items more carefully, and then you would get your working capital projections based on that. But those still derive off of revenue and expenses, so this is fine. Cool. Has everyone reached up to this point? Or if you have a question, please ask. All right, great. So then you average these three numbers. Again, NA for 2015, because I didn't go look at 2014 numbers. So it's approximately 1%. And then you do your revenue times your 1%. Yep. Right, copy and paste that over. And then we sum all of those up. So from earnings before interest and after taxes, add back / subtract your adjustments, and then you get your free cash flow projected, copy paste that over, and then you get your free cash flow up to 2023. And so that is step one of DCF complete, of a very basic DCF done. So we'll be going over the rest next week. Yes.
I just tried to across for a time, but what's the formula? Let's say 1471.
Oh, this is just summing it up.
So, okay, so if you drag it.
Yeah, so if you the idea was to drag it over, but since people asked what the other ones in bold were, I just made the formula.
So it's always just the stop. Right? I feel like the bold.
Yeah, it is. Just summing those up. Or you can just copy and paste the thing in G15. Right, so this is a very, very, very basic DCF. Also, this company is not hard to understand. But since you all are freshmen and sophomores, none of this will honestly be expected of you in any interview possible. So, unless they're really mean. But basically in this club, we kind of do this for our DCF. And honestly, most people's stuff isn't even that much more complicated than this. So just take this to your DCF model, and then you should be good. And then we'll be going for WAC and then terminal value next week because it's 436. But I do understand you all have your DCFs too, but honestly, like, the sector directors need to be not lazy and help you with it. So I am blaming them for this. All right, that's it for today. See you all next week.